familiar faces in the audience. I feel like I'm at work almost. The 3D in the audience, so that's great. Did you want to do your spiel? Okay. All right, quick agenda for tonight. We're going to do an introduction to Google Tag Manager. Just curious, how many people are familiar with Tag Manager? How many people are using it already? That's way more than I expected. So, okay, that's good. That means that I can maybe move along a little bit quicker than what I was going to normally do. We're going to have Kristin talk about the measurement model. This is a methodology that we've implemented in 3D. We've been doing it for probably a year formally, and we're continuing to embrace it, and I'll let her talk about that. Then I'm going to jump into the anatomy of Google Tag Manager. We're going to talk about how it works, the components, some things that you need to know. And then finally, we'll jump into some examples. So it's also, questions are at the end. We're going to have 10-15 minutes for Q&A, so just jot them down, and we'll take them at the end there. So a little bit about just some credentials here. We are at 3D. We are managing over 50 Google Tag Manager implementations currently. Huge clients, lots of big household names, Gerber, Nestle. Some of our clients are in the audience, so you might see your logo up there right now. Another thing about 3D marketing, we are the only Google Analytics certified partner in Minnesota. Not to be confused with AdWords partners, there's lots of them, because PPC is easy. We are the only Google Analytics partner. All right, so what is Google Tag Manager? Something you already know. So I might kind of go through this a little bit quicker. It's a free tool provided by Google. I know Josh just said something about enterprise, and we've got a gentleman from Insight here that I look forward to talking to after this. I'm sorry for not responding to your LinkedIn message, by the way. You're not the only one in the audience that I have ignored this week. So, I know, sorry. I said I needed to apologize. So, we've got, Google Tag Manager, conversion tracking, analytics, remarketing. It can do so many things. And we're going to dive into that. So, why Google Tag Manager? I think it's obvious. It's very easy to create, test, and deploy tags. If you don't know what a tag is, I'll go into it. Dependable data. It's hosted on Google, secure servers. You're not going to get hacked. It's great. Built-in integration with Google Analytics, AdWords, DoubleClick, many of the tools that we use on a regular basis here. Built-in syntax checking, syntax and error checking, excuse me. This is for if you're deploying some like custom HTML or JavaScript, it will actually check those the syntax for you and won't let you move forward if it's not correct. So, agency, sorry, people give me faces up here in the front row. It's agency friendly. I know a lot of you work for agencies, whether you're in-house at a client, agency, or independent. It's great because it's got support for multi-account support, user permissions. It's very nimble. You can basically construct it around your requirements internally. And then tag templates, these are great. In addition to the out-of-the-box Google products, they also have a bunch of support for third-party vendors, and I'm going to show you an example of what those look like as well. Super easy to learn, much like Google Analytics. Very easy to install and get up and running, and to start kind of interacting with the product, but there can be a steep learning curve if you really want to dive in. And the same thing is true of analytics as well. It's very easy to log in, look at page views, but if you really want to get into it, there's a learning curve there. New features are being released frequently. In fact, the version that we're going to go through tonight is formally called GTM 2.0. It just rolled out of beta like a month ago, maybe a little bit more. And Google's really ramping up the support that they're giving to the product. It's also free, so I think that's an advantage. Others might not think it's an advantage, like our wonderful sponsors. But it's a debate worth having. So how does it work? I'm going to fly through this. If I'm going too fast, someone just kind of wave their arms or something. I just wanted to walk through setting up an account. So you log in, create an account. There's some best practices to follow when you're in this piece of it. The account name is the organization name, and you want to make sure that you're not naming like the website name, for example, because we're going to be using this over and over for your clients. So in this case, I'm using MnSearch in many examples here this evening. So in this example, it's MnSearch. Do you want to share your data anonymously with Google? I mean, they're looking at it anyway, and I want to make a better product, so I say yes. And then the next thing you need to do is set up your first container. Container, this is a website. Typically, this is how I name it. You could do whatever works for your organization. But the example here is MnSearch.org. If MnSearch had a separate website for their summit, you could set up another container for the summit website. So that's how that piece looks like. You guys like those animations, or are they cheesy? You like them? I'm not sure. I was kind of like, maybe I should take those out. Okay, so once you get through that step, you get to the installation script. So this is a lot like Google Analytics. It's just a little piece of JavaScript. So I don't know why you would want to see that up close, but just in case you did, that's what it looks like. And then you want to install it. Installation is very similar to Google Analytics. You literally just take the script, copy and paste it into your website. Very important. You want to remember it goes immediately after the body tag, and that's important if you want Google Tag Manager to work properly. With analytics, we could be a little more liberal with where we put it. A lot of people put it in the footer. Some people put it in the header. Also, this is one of the things that I have to send back right away. If I send this off to developers and I say, please put this immediately after the body tag, with something like this and an arrow, I'll come back and it's like in the div of a table somewhere, like in a sidebar, and it's like, it's not good. So this is where it needs to go, after the body tag. These are little tips. This is my tip template. When you see that happen, that's like something you might want to remember. Okay, once that's all done, you want to make sure that it's installed correctly. So once again, using MnSearch as the example, I'm using a little tool called Google Tag Assistant here. I can see that I've got little green happy faces. Google Tag Manager is looking good. Analytics is looking good. So now we can start tagging. A few more things about containers. It's like a blueprint. If you're trying to explain or understand what it is, because it's kind of an abstract concept, it's a blueprint. It's a instruction manual for your marketing plan. There's one code snippet per container. It's usually a 1-to-1 website container ratio. Typically, I'd say 94% of the time, it's going to be in alignment with your GA property. One last concept to know that's important: containers are published in version. What that means is that you can work in something that's kind of like a development environment and get all your tags in place and test them, make sure they're working properly before you publish them. And when you publish them, they're versioned. So you can roll back if you have to, if you make a mistake or something like that, which is really handy. At this moment, I'm going to hand it over to Kristin Ziegler, and she's going to talk about the measurement model.
Hey guys. Kristin Ziegler, I'm a director over at 3D. So again, it does feel like work here a little bit. I'd love to see you guys all in the front row. If you guys did not like all of Derrick's animation, then you'll love my slides, because I only have one. Measurement model, this is not a new idea. Why are we talking about it? It's a really important piece to planning, especially when you're going to be taking on a large site, some of those things that you saw up there. You've got to have a good plan, or you're not going to know what to measure. So we're just sort of sliding this in here really quick. I think Jeff Sauer probably talked about this too at the last search snippet back in October. When I talked to Scott and he asked for a sub for somebody who had to bow out, we thought, let's just reiterate this idea, and you're probably going to be hearing it all year. So measurement model. This is your blueprint, as you mentioned, for digital success. This is, again, not a new idea. There's a lot of other people that are going to talk about this better than I will. They're going to evangelize it better. We all know Avinash. He really sort of brought this idea to the forefront in the digital space, possibly. But for any of you guys who are involved with direct response, we've been doing this for a long time. You know who you're going to send things out to. You know what your response is supposed to be. You're always doing an ROI. This is sort of just getting this over from a digital perspective. This is also really important when you have big clients where you're fighting for their dollars, especially when there's a lot of traditional marketing and your part of the pie in the media marketing mix is this big. Even though your ROI is through the roof, they're going to say, I don't care, I don't know what you're talking about, they're not engaged, because maybe they're more interested in what that traditional advertising is getting them. So I'm not going to read this, but really he's just sort of reiterating the idea. If you don't have a plan, there's no objective, you're not going to know if you succeeded or failed, and you're not going to be able to explain it, and you're not going to be able to get your next project if you're on the agency side. Which I was going to ask, how many people here are client side? Diane? And is everyone else agency then? Yeah, those hands go way higher. Woo, okay. So why is a measurement model necessary? I sort of kind of alluded to that. I'm looking around, you guys all sort of seem like you know what this is about. We want to ensure that all stakeholders are aligned. And it provides an anchor of value. When we're talking to clients and they have no idea, hey, we're spending $100K this month on a PPC program, and we tell them that their results are through the roof and they don't know why, that might be a success for us and we think we're really doing well, but they don't understand why it's a success. The other thing about providing an anchor of value, when you're trying to tie something that's offline to online, or trying to tie online behavior to purchase intent, it's really important to agree on that up front. And we also want to avoid the data distractions and overload. A lot of times what will happen is you'll find all of this great data. You have no plan. Your GA implementation, your GTM implementation, you've got everything tagged to the nines. What do you report on? You give them 75 slides and you think that's a really solid deliverable, but there's nothing actionable. The CEO is not going to look at that. Well, they might, but depends on what they are. So what we're constantly trying to ask is, what is the number that's going to prove success? What is the number that's going to get your client their raise? What's the number that your boss is going to get their promotion? That's how we're going to prove success. And these can be 3 numbers. It could be 2 numbers, it could be 1 thing. What is gonna make them take action? Kind of walked into this a little bit. So as we're walking through this, you wanna consider your audience. When I say that a CEO is not gonna look at a 75-page deck, they wanna see 1 number and they're gonna walk out of the room. They might not, but you get the idea. I use the 3-second rule. If you're showing them something, they should be able to consume that very quickly and understand. So consider that when you're reporting up in your visuals. Minimal context, if I'm looking at a chart, I better be able to understand that right away. Why do I care? Again, 75-page deck, why is somebody gonna care? What are they gonna get to, especially, again, when you're fighting for their dollars? And this also helps us get to recommendations on what's gonna be actionable faster. Okay, I have to do this because this isn't working, versus your site visits went up this month. Great, but why do I care? What did you do? Map everything back that you're talking about in that upfront piece of reporting to a measurement model. What is a measurement model? It's structured thinking. It's a key first step in reporting and analysis to become actionable. It's a contract for success. It is, yes, I am doing the work you asked me to do. And how do you get there? You're starting to ask why, you're answering why questions that will lead you through a process of determining objectives, goals, and KPIs. The other thing that we like to talk about a lot is stay focused. Once you have that measurement model in place, there's going to be some shiny things. There's going to be people coming in, other agency partners, if you're on the client side, other people are going to be doing other campaigns. Stay focused on your measurement model so you can make sure to show success. This is just a nice quote from a blog that our own Dave Woodbeck wrote on our website. And this goes back to, it doesn't have to be measuring everything. Just because you can pull everything and you have all of the data, doesn't mean you should always be presenting all of the data. Okay, how do we get there? This top level here, this is an executive sort of level thing. You're going to be getting business objectives from an executive level. You're doing your why questions, you're reviewing the list, and you're prioritizing, you're keeping, you're killing. The next kind of level is defining and mapping KPIs to objectives. That's going to be more of your director, manager level conversation. And you're going to review those examples. The next thing, when you're talking to somebody who's got the data, somebody who's gone through the site or the asset, either it's already created and you're running a program against existing assets, or you're setting up new assets, so maybe it's a UX person. you're going to start figuring out what metrics, what audiences, what messages, and how to map those back to KPIs. This model is meant to work with an entire marketing program. So this could be for, we have an educational client who we've got a measurement model for their entire efforts for the entire year. And we've got smaller measurement models at the campaign level. So this conversation can take weeks, and it might feel, hey, that's just a piece of paper, we just threw some things in there. But you really got to get people aligned to what we're trying to measure, since we can measure it. So this is just, in the spirit of minimal context. The idea here is to just say, if I have a measurement model, that feeds into the tracking requirements, which is important for GTM setups, or tagging setups, or incitement setups. You've got to understand what are you tracking? The measurement model feeds that. Those two things are cornerstones to a successful analysis cycle. We're not going to get to recommendations if we don't have those two things, or it's not going to be as easy. What does the process look like? We're asking our why questions, we get our measurement model, that feeds into tracking requirements, we do a GTM implementation. What's really exciting about GTM, and I love developers, I was one, I still am sometimes, we get to decouple from them. No longer are we having these long scripts of here, event track, every single one of these things, JavaScript, every single element on your page. We send that container snippet to dev, and we're starting our data collection plan. All the while, we're getting ready for how are we going to analyze that, coming back to the measurement model. So it really allows us to be a little bit more efficient. In some cases, when you're an agency partner and you don't own the asset, but you're responsible for the tracking and the reporting, what's really exciting is that you can do that as long as they get that code snippet on the page. There's no longer those long cycles of going back and forth. Building a measurement model. So we sort of reached out to, I believe maybe it was James, maybe somebody else, Scott Dodge, somebody on the board, and said, let's just show you sort of the process for this. So before, I don't know anything about MnSearch, let's pretend. And I just said, okay, what do I know? I haven't had a conversation yet, but I'm going to go into a meeting with these guys and figure that out. I know they're a nonprofit, professional organization. I went and looked at their mission statement, which is essentially educate, share, and connect. And they talked about a couple of KPIs they threw over the fence. They want to know about newsletter subscribers, member registrations, summit registrations, and they want to get to the idea of member versus paid. So those are our segments. So that starts the conversation. The next thing, super simple, before I walk in there, or before I walk into that meeting, I'm talking to them, I'm filling in this thing, whether this is exactly right or not, this is unfinished. I've got my objectives, I've got goals, I've got KPI segments, and even doing like just a teeny, audit on their sites, looking at, okay, maybe if I've got this share, I also want to understand engagement on the job board. The way we do this is we sort of set this up, we have those conversations back and forth, this would get filled in. I've got implementation notes that go straight over to our tracking experts. In this case, I'm going to tell them, hey, figure out a way to determine any incomplete registrations or signups, things that I haven't maybe finished. So maybe we're losing an opportunity. I need to review this with the stakeholders, and I'm going to tell tracking to categorize all those registrations by type. The voice is shaking a little bit. Oh, good. As soon as it just gets very shaky, it's your turn. Thank you, guys. So we're going to try to have the Q&A be really focused on GTM. So if you've got questions about measurement model, again, it's something we've talked about a lot. It's something that Scott Dodge is going to probably cram down your guys' throat this year. Make sure you really get that notion in mind. So with that, off to you, Derrick. Thanks, guys.
I'm back. Did you miss me? I missed you. What time is it? Okay, good. All right, so the anatomy of Google Tag Manager. We talked about containers a little bit. Within So we're shifting gears real quickly here. So we were just talking about some sort of like, business objective. Now I'm gonna jump into the product and show you some screenshots, how it works and how you can start leveraging it tomorrow. So tags, triggers, and variables. These are the 3 core concepts within Tag Manager that I want you to walk away with a good understanding of today. They all live within a container. I shut it off, I'm sorry, okay. Tags, variables, and triggers, they all work together within a container. I'm repeating myself because I want you guys to know this. I want you guys to know how it works. What are tags? It's sort of an abstract concept. A tag can be so many things. A tag could be event tracking that you send to analytics or maybe some other analytics tool. It could be, it can execute the scripts themselves, conversion tracking, remarketing codes, custom HTML, third-party integration. For all I know, you could probably, in Citin, it has a tag you could fire within Google Tag Manager, which wouldn't make any sense, but hypothetically possibly true. I spent a lot of time on those little icons, by the way, so details. All right, so when you create a tag, this is the screen that you're going to see when you log into Tag Manager. A lot of you said that you were familiar with Tag Manager. How many of you have dived in and sort of dived? I don't know. And actually started working with the GTM 2.0? Okay, so this is good. You guys are going to learn something then tonight. It's way different. I'm talking about triggers and variables. They used to be like macros and firing rules. It makes a lot more sense now. Google finally hired a actual product manager about June or July of last year, and they're really turning this into an actual enterprise product that's worth using. Well, it's worth using before, but okay, so this is the tag screen. As you can see, we've got, I'm going to try this out. The built-in Google Google products, but we've also got a lot of third-party stuff. ComScore, ClickTail. I don't even know what some of these are, but I'm sure they're important and useful. When you're setting up a tag, you can simply just figure out which tag that you want to. Too quick. I'll walk through it. I'll dive in. Okay, let's talk about triggers. Triggers tell tags when to do stuff. They're kind of like a traffic cop or a stoplight, or your wife, possibly, depending on your situation. They tell tags when to fire. An example would be a specific URL. You want to fire a conversion code on a thank you page, for example. If a user takes a specific action that you're looking for, maybe they click sign up in an event registration form, just like what Kristin was talking about with the measurement model. We've identified that as a KPI that will be executed via a trigger within our container. So even though this says tags at the top, this is actually an example of a trigger because I want you to focus right there. All of this says when should this tag fire. So in this particular example, I want a tag to fire when the URL is any one of these things. Also, when everything's loaded on the page. So if I'm losing you, it's okay. I don't want you to understand what's happening at this very moment. Just know that very versatile, very easy to set up. I see some people smiling because they're like, I know what that means. I know how to do that. And then finally, variables. So variables return values to tags and triggers. Both tags and triggers can leverage the power of variables. Variables always return something. An example would be the domain name that you're on, or it could be the target link, a URL, where's this linking to? It might be a third party, that way you can track external link clicks, for example. Element attributes, it's always going to return something. Oh, sorry, I gotta go back. Jeff Sauer told me that I needed to have a cat slide in order to have a successful presentation, so I put that in. This is what the variable screen looks like. These are the variables that are available out of the box within Tag Manager. Not gonna dive into all of them, but I will use some as an example when we get into some cool stuff later. So, examples of how this stuff actually works and what it looks like. When you log into Google Tag Manager, this is your dashboard. This is what you're gonna see. It's sort of an at-a-glance view. You can start creating a new tag, choose from over 20 tag types. It'll show you the version that you're editing. It'll show you whether this version that you're looking at is published or not, how many changes you have. You can add a note about it. You can look at some previous versions. That's pretty neat. Creating tags, super simple. You choose your tag type. For this particular example, it's AdWords. We're going to do AdWords conversion. You could also easily do an AdWords remarketing because the syntax is very, very similar. Choose when you want that tag to fire. All pages, some pages, perhaps it's a click or perhaps it's a form snippet. Yeah, that's an example. We've also got triggers, which I kind of already went into. So I just want to walk through it. What I would want this tag, whatever it is, to fire on a page view when the URL equals whatever I've set it up to be, and also when the DOM is ready. And this is, you're going to choose this 99% of the time. You very rarely want to fire something before the page is fully loaded. This is just an example of what creating that filter looks like. And now it's getting confusing. It's like triggers, filters. There's like some sub-layers here. This filter, basically, when I say confirmation pages, right here, the URL, within the URL there's going to be thank you. I'm going to say this is confirmation pages. I can reuse this. Thank you URL, fire this tag. That's what that filter says. Name triggers for reuse. When we talk about having a measurement plan and figuring out what you want to track before you start tracking, as Kristin was talking about, this is a big part of that. Think about what you're going to be doing. Look for commonalities. Look for things that are sort of global or universal that you can implement, and you'll have a much cleaner GTM implementation. Here's all the built-in variables. Remember, variables always return something. So in this case, a lot of the available options are page URL, hostname, page path. By default, with GTM 2.0, these are turned off, and that's why you see these little boxes right there, these little empty check boxes. They must be enabled before use. So it's really, I mean, you check the box, and then it's available for use. But they do that to sort of, I believe, I could be wrong, but my hypothesis is that for everything that you add to your GTM container, it increases the size just a little bit. So they're just trying to keep it efficient and don't put in what you don't need to use. Jumping into custom variables. Custom variables are things that it's kind of like a framework for something that you want to return, but it's not built in such that you need to tell GTM what you're looking for. Still super simple to understand and implement. I'm going to get into some really cool examples so you'll know exactly what that means. Like right now, configuring variable. So this custom variable, I'm using the type of JavaScript. I'm going to call it page title. And then I just pass some really simple JavaScript. If you don't know JavaScript, that's fine. There's a site called Stack Overflow. I'm not actually really a developer. I just copy and paste from Stack Overflow all day. So, and that's actually exactly what I did here. So what this variable is going to return is the page title. Why is this useful? This is useful for adding insight into your report. Say you've got event tracking set up. Say you run a recipe website, for example, and you're saying, well, this person shared this recipe. Well, you could also additionally pass the page from which they shared that recipe. It might be useful. I'm not really sure. It depends on your measurement model, and that's where that comes into play. Okay, sorry guys. All right, cool stuff. This will probably take 5 minutes or so, and then I think we will have some time to open it up for Q&A. And this is cool stuff. This is like, okay, we've talked about measurement model. I showed you how GTM works. Like, why would you want to go do this tomorrow? Why would you want to go to work and say, hey, we got to do this? Here's some examples. I'm going to show you lookup tables, one of my favorite features. Really cool piece of functionality within Tag Manager. Custom dimensions, some stuff that I've done for MnSearch is a part of this measurement model. Pre-populating forms, manipulating search engine results, stuff like that. All right, so lookup tables. I love lookup tables. I actually have a slide. It was really cheesy about how I love lookup tables. It wasn't going to work out very well. Okay, you set it up, choose your variable type, lookup table, name it something that's relevant to whatever you're trying to do. And then in this case, I'm going to, for this example, I'm going to pass the input variable to my lookup table for the host name. What that means is that, and then I set up my lookup table as such. I use 3D marketing as an example. When I pass the host name to the lookup table, if it's this, it returns that and such. So what this basically enables you to do is create 3 properties within your analytics account, and then automatically send the page view to the right property based off of whether you're in dev stage or production, which is just a good way to keep your data clean and segmented. I do have one cheesy little thing. They will make your life easier, and this is very true. Okay, getting geographical information. This is another custom variable, or custom JavaScript variable rather. I've just named it get user geo. keep doing this. Okay. Custom JavaScript, get user geo, real simple JavaScript. I'm using a service here called ipinfo.io. It's free, it's fairly dependable. I've actually used it quite a bit over the last year or so. What this is going to do, this real simple variable, is it's going to say, hey, hit this free API and give me back geographical information of the user. What can we do with that? Number one, save it in a cookie for future reference. You don't want to keep hitting the API because there are some restrictions in place, and if you run a site with hundreds of thousands of page views, you definitely don't want to do that. So grab it once, save it in a cookie. You can wrap logic around whether you need to check the API, which is outside of the scope of this presentation. So that's cool, so we have that. So keep that in mind, because that plays into this next one. Pre-populating forms. This is not a variable, rather this is a custom HTML tag. I've just called it pre-populate form. This is a very rudimentary example. This is not like production-ready code, but for purposes of the presentation, I think you'll understand how it works. So very simple piece of HTML here. What I'm going to do is, using the previous example of getting users geo, I'm going to load that variable right here into this JavaScript variable. I've got it. What that tells me at this point, I've got the user's city, state, zip code, country, latitude, longitude coordinates, which are like centralized to the city. What can we do with that? We can pre-populate forms, so that's pretty neat. Here's an example of what that would look like. So a user gets a form. We don't even know who they are yet. We're just looking at their IP address, and we can already mostly fill this form out. Now, this form doesn't really make much sense because there's no contact information there. I don't even know where this came from. We probably would have a phone number or email address, most likely. But you get the point. It's very cool. I would assume it increases conversion rates, but I have not. Does it? Angie has pizza in her mouth. No, not pizza. Where's pizza? Angie has a sandwich in her mouth, and she just nodded yes. So I would assume that that would actually help. Or it could scare people away, because they'd be like, I don't know how you know this. Just kidding. Okay. Custom dimensions. So this is cool. We talked about KPIs for MnSearch, and one of the things that we looked at was members versus non-members, or logged in versus logged out. That was a little more tricky to figure out because it required looking at cookies that exist on the user's browser and some other complicated stuff. I just didn't really have time, but we are going to be working with MnSearch to put these things in place so they can have really great reports and insights going forward. But one thing I did implement, because it was a lot more simple, was the author custom dimension. Does everyone know what custom dimension is in analytics? Okay, I see nods, no more hands. We're getting tired. Okay, so pay attention to this guy right here. This is the index number. You're going to need to reference that index within Google Tag Manager. I would imagine one day that they'll talk to each other very seamlessly, and you'll just be able to read custom dimensions right for GA. I think that'd be really wonderful, and I will be sure to share my feedback with Google. So you've got that set up in GA. Okay, great. So now you jump over to GTM. First thing we need to do is set up a variable. The variable type in this case is going to be a DOM element. DOM is short for Document Object Model. You don't have to be a developer. It just means that, hey, we're going to go look at something on the page. What are we going to look at on the page? We're going to look for something called post author, and then within that, we're going to look for, we're going to name the variable post author so we can reference it in the future. We're going to look for an ID called post meta, and then we're going to look for a specific attribute called author. So in this next example, nothing changes for the user. So we've done all this stuff in GA and in GTM. Nothing's changed for the user. When they go to the site, they're still going to see this. They're still going to see this. They're still going to see this. On the back end, the code side, this is what we're looking at right here. Okay, so then how do we actually bring that into our analytics reports and do something cool with it? This is where I said you got to remember that one, not what you call the custom dimension, but the actual index, I guess is what it's called, as it says right there. Reference the custom dimension value is going to be post author. If you recall, post author reads that variable that we just looked at, and we'll return it with a page view to GA. So when you send that initial page view request to analytics, if this has a value, it will send it. If it doesn't, it won't. So you don't have to worry about mucking up your data. And this is what it looks like then in implementation. I have changed some of these numbers around just to protect the innocent, I guess, and not expose confidential data. But as you can see, now you can bring this in as a secondary dimension or in an advanced segment. And then, I mean, this is one example. Think about what you could do with this, with having GA and GTM talk to each other. Anything that's on your page, or anything that's not on your page, anything that's in your CMS that you want to expose into GA, this is how you do it. No developers required. Very cool. So just tying it back to what Kristin said about the measurement model, track everything that's important to you. This is the last time I'm going to accidentally do that, I think. Okay, this one is actually kind of cool. I hesitated because this is not so much GTM specific as it is working with like rich snippets and leveraging some of Google's new technologies to enhance your search engine result pages. But it's so easy to do within GTM, and also a blog that I follow just kind of uses a very similar example. So I want to show you how simple it is. I'm not going to jump into what all this code means. This is JSON markup. This is rich snippet bar. You've seen this because you've been trying to do like ratings, and I'm sure you guys have all done this stuff before. So I built it. I threw it in there. I want to remember to hit support document right because we are going to do some on-page code manipulation. What we can do with that. What that one code snippet that I just showed you, put into custom HTML and fired it, what we have now is in MnSearch. Now this may or may not be live. I literally implemented this and then went into Photoshop and made it look like this. My guess is over the next, because I just did this like 2 days ago, in the next few days I think that you'll start seeing this for MnSearch, and I'm going to keep an eye on it. But that's pretty cool, because number one, like it's useful. Number two, you're taking up more real estate in the SERPs, so I think that's pretty neat. Another one is events. So right now, Google, they're slowly rolling out how much of these types of like rich data they support. But one that is supported right now, which you can go implement in Tag Manager right now, is events, which is very neat, especially for MnSearch. You can wrap this in. Again, this is the same, that was this right here. That took care of both of those things that we just saw. So this fun little search box, and also this. So if you go and type in MnSearch events, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the actual events coming up. I think it's pretty neat. You're going to see more and more of this type of functionality being released and integrated, so I would get on top of it. It's cool. Easily increase search engine visibility. So that's it. That's the cool stuff that I have. I want to take like 2 minutes and just talk about implementation. You don't want to be this person. Have a plan. Look at your measurement plan, or some variation of it. That's so important. You want to, don't just jump in and start tagging. Like I said earlier, look for commonalities, look for things that you can do. Measure first, then measure again. Ensure you have identified all objectives, make sure stakeholders are in alignment, and then implement. I gave this at work, and people said that my shirt, it was like matches. They thought I did it on purpose. That wasn't true. Okay, marketing developers, you guys are not going to have any more friction anymore. You're not going to like send them all these requirements to do your rich snippets and do your SEO and be like, oh, this doesn't fit with our CMS or whatever. Get them out of the way, get Tag Manager on your site, and start getting back to your job. And then you guys are everyone likes each other again. Okay, deployment flashback. Establish a workflow. This is important. You don't, especially if you run like an important authoritative site, you don't just want to kind of willy-nilly throw Tag Manager on the site and then have no workflow around what's happening. So that's so important. Enforce unique user accounts. It's especially for those of us who work with agencies. A lot of us use like a shared analytics or PPC account. And how frustrating is it when you see changes and you're like, who did that? Because you have no idea. No one leaves notes. No one annotates. It's annoying. So enforce unique user accounts. Remember to annotate. If you don't know what those screens look like, in analytics, it's right here. In GTM, it's right here. And it helps us all out. So that's it. We have some questions, possibly. Please clap.